Oscar, exclusive or he, speaking first.
Native speaking second, shield outline.
Opening opposition.
Sam speaking third, shield please.
Gavin second, no preference. Thank you. And closing opposition.
Move first, no preference.
Second, shield.
And closing opposition. Ian speaking first.
Laura speaking second.
Great. There's no debate. Happy to call on Prime Minister.
Panel, I think it's fitting that we're in Greece to use Plato's analogy of the cave. And it is only when you step outside the cave do you realise the full perspective of what you have been consuming and all that you knew. Disney is the cave, and we are going to break it apart and show why various different viewpoints, different cultural, racial, gender, and information provision niches are important to make sure that people are informed and people have a choice over the perspective that they take. Our model is simple and fourfold. Firstly, we are going to make elements of Disney that are already discrete, either through previous acquisition or through their separate operational entities, independent companies such as ABC and Lucasfilms. We're going to make sure that operation is wholly separate, a separate board of directors and a separate CFO and otherwise. We're going to make sure that they are so distinct that you will have different shareholders, completely different, and also we're going to make sure the shares are obviously proportional. I think that's fair enough. So, we're going to enforce that those companies can't re-conglomerate under prevailing antitrust laws. 3 points in this Prime Minister. Firstly, how you do not serve certain cultural niches that are crucial for the development of people in those niches and also society as a whole. Secondly, a very basic but important point on innovation. And thirdly, how this distorts information provision in the marketplace. On cultural niches. I think the important thing to remember is that Disney is a functional monopoly on high-quality narratives for children in the realm of certain media. That is, there is no incentive for internal competition of those narratives. Disney has no logical reason to propagate multi-dimensional narratives to do with gender, multi-dimensional narratives to do with racial ideals. That is because of economies of scale. There is an incentive for them to maintain a singular operational focus. That is why all narratives in all Disney princess films go exactly the same way in terms of the difficulties that are faced and how they remedy. I'm going to contest that the difficulties and the narrative structures that are going to be heard in back half, in the way they're nodding their heads, are not saying it in terms of what is actually overcome in the narrative. So I think this is important for 2 reasons. I think firstly, it means that the mechanism that is important for both cases is applicable. That is, purchasers dictate what Disney produces, and because Disney only has a singular operational focus, they are only incentivized to produce what will be the most profitable singular narrative or generalized narrative. I want to note on the gender dimension that most purchasers, because of the general distribution of consumption wealth in society, are male. Producers are also male, which means that production of Disney films is incentivized to make the most palatable narrative for male purchasers and consumers. I differentiate that crucially from the individuals who consume via the watching of this media, that are the young and impressionable daughters of these male purchasers. I think it's crucial to note that these individuals who watch the films really don't have any opt-out of those films in the sense that they are pressured by their peers to watch them, or a chance to opt into other narratives, because they do not exist, and even if they did, they would not be palatable for the person controlling their access. But I think the second dimension, racially, is that some niches do exist under the status quo, right? I think there are some non-Western, non-Caucasian cultures that would very much like to see representation in Disney's main line of production, animated princess films, for example. But when they are the non-majority, there is no incentive to cater to those narratives until the majority cares. I'm going to preempt a lot of this debate where they're going to point to Moana, Aladdin, Mulan, and say that those are contingent on the mechanism of the majority of society, the majority of the consumer body, having caring preferences for those narratives to go forward. I think that is Twofold. Firstly, I think on a principled level, minority niches should not be bound to wait for the majority segments of the population to care about them before they have a narrative they can provide for their children. But I think secondly, it means that even if you do decide to cater to minorities, you also want to make that narrative necessarily palatable and non-upsetting to the general population. So you remove important culturally salient features of those narratives, and in the very worst case, fetishize and westernize them. I would say that Princess Jasmine is a completely inaccurate example of the average Middle Eastern woman and the struggles and narrative difficulties that she would face. I would say Mulan is likewise. And it's not just about the narrative structures they face, it is about what they care about. It is about the different pressures that they face from the society and around them. And in some cases, a non-acknowledgement that there are structural barriers to women's progression in those societies, and something we think is important to acknowledge. Briefly on innovation. I think that the basic monopoly analysis applies tenfold to Disney. That is, because they have captured a large amount of the market, consumers are de facto bound to consume their products unless they opt out from that consumption entirely. That obviously means that you have no need to compete by innovation because you de facto set the price of those products. That also means you don't have, so not only are you reducing the incentives to compete externally because there are no external competitors, you also have no incentives to compete internally because a large amount of Disney industry is vertically integrated. That means that your animation is always going to come from the same company that goes to the storyline. That means that different news producers are always going to hire the same news anchors. This means that what you get is absolutely no spread across the board and no improvement in the quality of the media that is provided for. I'll take opening.
Frozen, Brave, Moana, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, the Star Wars sequels. How does your entire case of how Disney has no reason to tell anything non-traditional gel with the reality of the movies that it's made over the last 5 years?
In open government, I am going to stand here and take it. These are incredibly fetishized and westernized depictions of non-Western cultures. I would argue that all of those do have narratives that have female empowerment, but do not show the kind of struggles that are necessary to overcome in those societies for female empowerment, and also overly prioritize certain features of that individual's personality going forward. On information provision, I think it's crucial to look at the wider implications of the info slide and see that Disney also controls large segments of the media. Rudimentary one-on-one debating analysis. But I think when you control things like ABC and papers across the globe, from the Sydney Morning Herald to the Wall Street Journal, you get a monolithic conception of liberal media. Why is that? Because Disney is the second largest provider by a country mile of news media in the world after News Corporation. That means it is the vanguard for providing liberal media information to consumers. Two problems. Firstly, it, as I argued through the economies of scale and non-internal competition, incentivizes a monolithic conception of what this looks like, which is A, not catering to different consumers who may want it, but B, disproportionately influences people into those niches because of the power that news media has. But I also think it's important in making sure that you get a diverse range of what liberal ideas is, so that the opposition to liberal forces acknowledge they exist.
Do you think the previous speaker represents an actual on the leader of opposition?
Disney isn't stupid in the way that it conducts its operations or in the way that it directs its movies. They know that if they produce every single movie and every single TV show with a similar narrative, a similar looking cast of characters, with a similar storyline and a similar plot, they know that's going to eventually cannibalize into their sales, but also that's just not going to be very interesting for their own audience. The reason that Disney is successful today across many different platforms is their ability to diversify the kinds of stories that they tell and their ability to represent different kinds of experiences to the extent that other studios cannot. 3 things in this speech. First, I'm going to deal with the opening government case. Secondly, explain why the status quo is much better for consumers. And finally, why we actually get better representation and diversity on our side. So what does opening government tell you? First of all, they say that Disney is a monopoly. The narratives of princess films are all really similar, and there's an incentive to produce a single narrative and to take the most palatable narrative to its white male shareholders. Here's the problem with this. This may have been true like 40 years ago when the representation of Disney was like Sleeping Beauty and Snow White. That's no longer true. That hasn't been true for like the past 10 years, where you've seen a massive diversification in the kinds of princess films or princess stories that Disney chooses to tell. You go for non-traditional characters like, like Moana, like Brave, for instance, that tell the story specifically about female emancipation. So they are incredibly responsive to the demand for diversity that exists today, both in terms of like racial diversity, but also in terms of the storytelling and the plot that it chooses to portray. So therefore, these films must be narratively diverse to keep its audience entertained and to keep up with the times, because Disney is sensitive to these sorts of cultural pressures as well. Otherwise, all like its platforms and movies would ultimately cannibalize on one another. But even like they say that even good Disney films like Moana are dependent on society's goodwill towards minorities. I have 3 responses to this. Like, at present, there seems to be a large cultural shift towards becoming more inclusive and towards increasing representation in film, so I think that's ultimately a good thing if this company is responsive to that sort of demand. Secondly, just that is woefully uncomparative, right? On their side of the house, like, they want to have, like, what, like the Asian studios making the Asian films for the Asian audiences, and the black studios making the black films for the black audiences. Like, there, you get a massive cultural splintering and a cultural isolation on their side, because you send the message that, people of color or people from different experiences and different backgrounds should only be seen in their films and not our mainstream ones, given that they seem to still see mainstream demand as being largely white. So I'd like to know what their characterization of that audience is. But finally, I don't understand why you get more representative or more diverse films on the comparative, given that these studios often just tend to have far less money to be able to promote these sorts of more experimental, I guess, casts in the first place. So, number 1, why is this better for consumers? I think it's important to note that Disney is able to produce movies at a very, very high quality of production for a couple of reasons. Number 1, most studios are under massive pressure to constantly churn out films. What's rather unique about Disney is that they can invest in far longer production cycles simply because they're diversified across multiple studios, which means that they have multiple revenue streams. Even if, for instance, if Pixar is releasing a ton of movies next year, they have other backups to rely on for revenue. This means that you only have a couple of studios that are ready to release films, which means that individual studios can have much longer production cycles. This is good in a couple of ways. It's better because it means that people can have more time to craft the kind of story arcs and the kinds of narratives they want to tell. Look at the fact that, for instance, Inside Out took something like 8 years to produce because they constantly revised the characters and they constantly revised the kinds of the kinds of people that you wanted to portray on screen at that time, because it was specifically about how young kids relate to their emotions. But it also means you can just invest in better things like graphics and far higher movies that are applying far higher production value. I think this is all really enjoyable for audiences to watch. But finally, it means that breaking up breaking up this sort of specific company means that investors tend to flee from an industry because this is essentially a targeted breakup of Disney for being what is essentially too successful, right? Because note that, I don't really buy that this actually meets the threshold for triggering antitrust law. Given that antitrust law isn't just about having a large market share, right? Because there are obviously other studios that do have significant market shares, like DC, like Toho. But it's also about the harm that you cause to consumers, and that's why you have antitrust law. That's why we accept, for instance, utility companies at some point do tend to be monopolies, but we only trigger antitrust at the point which it's actually harmful when they engage in things like price gouging. I think you get a wholesale fleeing of investors from the entertainment industry at the point at which you try and break up Disney for essentially becoming too successful and becoming too good of an investment. This is worse because that means that there's less money overall to produce really high quality films that are really enjoyable to watch. Because we think ultimately the purpose of this kind of entertainment is, yes, to amuse, but also to resonate with your audience, right? You have films like Brave and films like Inside Out that are able to resonate with its audiences by specifically telling you about the kind of unique challenges people experience growing up and how that feeds into your adulthood. I think that makes it far more enjoyable to watch than if this was a more one-dimensional story. But secondly, why do you get better representation and diversity? Before I move on, closing.
So how comparative is this? If you break up those studios, they're still huge studios, they have a lot of money. So the graphics and so on, it's not such a huge difference.
No, I think there's a couple of problems with this. Number 1, the reason that it's good to have it under one umbrella is that, for instance, you're able to engage, it means resource sharing between studios where storytellers or screenwriters, for instance, go from one studio to the other and are able to share resources in this way. But secondly, the point at which you want to break up studios means that these companies are now all actively competing against each other, which means that you still have the problem with far shorter production cycles that we told you still increase that kind of competitive pressure, which we don't think is particularly helpful. And thirdly, it's worse in terms of having representation and diversity. I'm going to explain that right now. Disney is a studio that is uniquely able to take a lot of risks regarding the kind of casting choices and the kinds of cast that it employs as a whole. This is for 3 reasons. Number one, there's a certain amount of safety in knowing that people will still come to watch a Marvel movie or still come to watch a Pixar movie. So you will still have a baseline of support upon which you can gauge that film. But secondly, they also tend to have things like really big advertising budgets to actually actively promote lesser known casts and lesser known main characters. But finally, also you have to know that investors really trust Disney, right? That's why they're able to support things like having an all-black cast in Black Panther, rather than, you know, if another studio tried to do that, it would be a more risky investment and therefore harder to sell to other people. That's why these sorts of like riskier like plots and also casts are able to be funded on our and projects are able to be funded on our side. So what are Disney's incentives to be representative in that way? Number one, the audience is incredibly socially conscious, right? These are often younger audiences that they try to appeal to. And this is the kind of movie, this is the kind of studio that people grew up with. People grew up with Star Wars, people grew up with things like a lot of the Disney princess movies. And in doing so, they realized that, you know, at the end of the day, the princess narratives that Disney originally came out with were all incredibly one-dimensional. And in order to then appeal to older audiences with movies like Brave or Moana, you need to go for a sort of different story arc that people would resonate with people. So Disney adapts as much as its audience does. The impact of this is that number one, we just get far more representation on film, and we frame how the audience is able to react to it. I think we could just get far more portrayals of like people of color on film and be seen as role models. Like, look at the fact that Rose and Finn, these two main characters in these Star Wars trilogies, are like people of color as well. But also, you just really this launches the careers of minority actors who aren't able to get a foothold in the industry and any other way. Seriously, can talk more about that. Disney's great. Feel free to that.
We thank the previous speaker very much and have to go up on the Deputy Prime Minister.
Panel, Disney has been around longer than Darian has been debating. And the problem with this is it means that it has taken this fucking long to get one story about a girl who lives in the island. It's taken this long to get an all-black cast to play in Black Panther. Panel, that is not good enough, the world that we live in. And it's great that they could name us 5 films that do represent minority views. We question them. Where is the film about gay individuals? Where is the film about Mexicans and Latinos? Where is the film that focused in Africa? None of these films exist within, and if they do, they exist not enough, not as proportional to the population. 3 things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the narratives and the consumers, the way in which they consume this media. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about news media, information, and why it is detrimental for opposition to not engage with this point of clash. And finally, I'm going to bring you some new material on the impact on the industry in terms of supply side and in terms of the way in which they process this. Let's first look at narratives and the way in which consumers consume this sort of media. Because Oscar gave you a lot of detail about why it is harmful that the mainstream media currently focuses purely, in the majority of cases, on white, Western-centric narratives. And this is largely because companies are scared to create contrasting narratives because it may undermine their base value. What we then hear in response from opposition in the POI and again in their speech is, no, but here are these examples, so how do you explain this change here? We tell you twofold. Firstly, even if it is the case that there are 5 of them, there are 500 more that are produced every year that create a white narrative. If it is the case that that is true, we do not understand why there are not a larger number of these minority films or TV shows. But secondly to that, we say that these portrayals are actually ones that are incredibly harmful. That is to say they're often incredibly specified or incredibly tokenistic in their narrative. And Disney is able to get away with this because they are often so monopolistic that they're the only ones producing this, so people don't question them. They just go, it's so great that Disney made a film with an all-black cast, rather than, did they actually represent that well, and did they promote good narratives? Although it then tells us, no, but they're not stupid. They realize they need to diversify, otherwise people will stop watching their films. Panel, what films are people going to go watch? If it is the case that you get fucked off at Pixar, you go and watch 20th Century Fox films. Oh wait, they're both owned by Disney. It is not the case that consumers are able to actually move away from Disney, given a large majority of the films are produced by them. Why then are we likely to get a change in a different sort of narrative under our side of the house? Firstly, we tell you can run contrasting narratives. That is to say, you are able to run like princess stories where the male gets saved and the female actually rise. You probably call it a prince film rather than a princess film. We think that's incredibly beneficial and can't happen at the point at which Disney has to propagate a male savior franchise rather than ever moving out. Secondly though, you also now have a reason to create minority films, because if you are 20th Century Fox, you are a market you can tap into to create direct minority films, which means that Pixar, who is now a separate company to you, would also have to do the same thing to compete. At the moment, there is only need for Disney to produce a couple of those films because they own everything. But now, where these individual companies all have to make those sort of films in order to tap into that market, you're likely to get a larger number of those films than currently exist. What do we hear then, substantially, from opposition about why they get better films? So first thing they say is that at the moment you can spend so long, Disney can spend so long making things like Inside Out because they have so much money and they can really enhance their animation. Firstly, panel, I question whether or not it was worth them to spend 8 years creating Inside Out, given there were so many strategical flaws about that. In fact, that a lot of kids became really insecure and were unsure about whether or not that was good. Note also, the second they made it Inside Out, then only took them 18 months to produce because they had tapped into a market and could monopolize it, and the second one was up for shit. That is incredibly harmful. On top of that though, we tell you that if it is the case that these companies do split up, they still have a lot of money. It is not the case now you have to spend less time or you have to spend less good animations. They're still going to be of the same quality. And thirdly, you know that a lot of these animations and graphics are actually non-rigorous, so it's unclear why simultaneous companies can't still use them under our side. The negative response then goes, but investors trust Disney, which means they're going to invest in it. There is no mechanism about why they split up into 20th Century Fox, into Lucasfilms, into Marvel Studios, into Pixar, why you no longer trust those companies individually. Because no panel, there's those brands that are actually produced at the beginning of films who go, this film is brought to you by Lucasfilms. That is the sort of thing that investors are likely to buy into. They're still going to invest in the same brand name, even if it's not owned overall. That tells you that we're far more likely to get better films under our side of the house. Let's now talk about information and news. And no panel, there was no engagement from opposition about this at all. What we told you is that Disney has a large control over media at the moment, and that's particularly true of liberal media. Note they own things like ABC, like the Wall Street Journal, like Fairfax and various papers in Australasia. That means that they have a large dominance over liberal media. Why is that harmful? That means that you're a consumer of liberal media, you normally only have one source to do it. You can either, for example, I'll take you in a second, go to News Corp if you're right-wing, or go to Disney if you're left-wing and choose their media. That's incredibly harmful because it means the spectrum of liberal media gets concentrated and is only seen as one way and one thing. That's harmful in particular at the point at which liberals want to engage with conservatives and you only push one liberal viewpoint proposing.
Yeah, but in order to solve this problem, you also have to break up Fox News Corporation, because otherwise you have a symmetry of power, because the liberal media is like segmented and the Fox market is complete and everyone loses to it.
Given this debate is hypothetical, we're happy to split up Fox News as well. It's unclear about why we can't do that. Okay, at the end of that then, it is proved that the problem we're having at the moment is an information concentration on Disney and their ability to control their liberal viewpoint the way in which they expand. Let's now talk about the impact on the industry, because Austin gave you some analysis on this and it wasn't all engaged in from say on. What we tell you is that the monopoly extends well beyond consumers. It also extends to other aspects of the industry. That's things such as actors or anchors or broadcasters. This means that if you are an actor, you rely heavily on Disney wanting to employ you. So if you do one film and you really fuck them off, chance of you getting hired again is very small. Proof of this is when Jennifer Lawrence finished her film with Sony, they produced a report saying she was a spoiled brat and she was never hired again by Sony and she had to turn to other things. The same thing is likely to happen if you piss off Disney. That means as an actor, you have to cater to what Disney wants. You have to cater to the sort of stories that they want, and you're not allowed to be innovative because you lose a job. The similar thing applies to all news anchors or broadcasters when they produce Sky Movies, for example. You have to buy the rights from Disney to produce those films. It means you can charge a massive price to those individuals and force them on the sort of films they want to show. Monopolistic control that Disney has not only harms consumers and the narratives, but also harms the film industry, the TV industry, and the news industry. We think that is disgraceful, therefore side with open government.
We thank the previous speaker very much, and I have to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
3 points. Number 1, why this policy shrinks diversity in representation. Number 2, why it shrinks quality and quantity of film. And thirdly, new extension coming from opening opposition. Why this harms our ability to police bad behavior that occurs within the industry. I'd like to point out from the very get-go, in terms of all the argumentation about representation, note there is not a single breath of analysis from OG about why this is better on the comparative on their side of the house. I think that is critical in evaluating this fact. Okay, let's talk about diversity in representation. The claim we get from OG is that there is no incentive to tell many stories, because you want to sell the most generally palatable product. So either that means that non-traditional stories are absent, or they are told through the majoritarian lens. 3 responses to this. Number 1, I want to just tell you facts that the globally informed citizen should know. Frozen is a film about a woman who decides her happy ending need not feature a man. Captain Marvel is a film about a woman who realizes she is powerful but constrained by an institution. Black Panther, a film produced by an almost exclusively minority cast, minority director, minority production team, tells the story of black empowerment and the legacy of colonialism. And just to put it, just another factually, this claim just genuinely cannot hold water any longer. Because some Geneva will say, we waited so long for it to happen. Yeah, do you know why we waited so long for it to happen? Because what happened was, Disney acquired Marvel. So our claim here is that the shift in the production patterns is attributable to the fact that we now have more safety in producing these sorts of works. Why is that true? This is my second response. What are the reasons, right? 3 responses about why you have reason to produce diverse films only if you are in one large conglomerate. Number 1, large conglomerates do not only sell one product, right? The presumption here is if you're a very big company, you want to sell just one thing that's very safe. But obviously that's not true. You want to tap into as many different markets as possible, and different markets want to see different stories. A great deal of capital means you can tap into more markets. That means you can tell different stories. Secondly, because there is often, but in response to the claim that these films will be suboptimal, there is often immense pressure and massive backlash against film that is seen to be tokenizing, that is seen to not sufficiently portray and capture the nuances of experience. That matters because that cuts into your profit line, and cutting into your profit line matters because you're an exec who wants to maximize profits and revenues. Thirdly, audiences really like progressive films. Know that the majority of the properties that are described in the motion and that OG talks about are properties that sell to young audiences. The audiences that are more progressive, that are more media savvy, and increasingly more liberal. Fourthly, because it gives power to young directors and young stars within the industry who can pressure the industry from within. So the more you cultivate a film, even if it's suboptimal, right, in telling a woman's story, the more you bring up, say, Brie Larson as an actress, star, the more star power you give her to exert pressure on execs to tell the story about her experience was like in the industry. Eventually she'll direct her own films, in which case she'll have the power to decide how those stories are told. So the more you include minority voices, the more over time it tends to be that those stories get better. But third response, just note how incredibly uncomparative this argument is, because we prefer suboptimal stories to non-existent ones. Note here, there is a strong risk associated with expanding into new markets. 3 reasons that's true. 1, because you don't know the size of the audience you're tapping into, because you have no information about how many of them turn up for these films. Second, often films are incredibly expensive to make. That means if I want to produce a black superhero film, for example, the cost of producing that film is just like the cost of producing Iron Man. The difference is now I have no certainty over the size of the market, and I don't know if I'll recoup the cost of making that film. Thirdly, backlash can kill you, right? Notice how like the DC has pulled the plug in this expanded universe, given how badly their sales were doing. Note, what does all that mean? If you're a small corporation with a relatively limited amount of capital, it means that it's harder for you to take risks and expand into new markets, so any one of those risks could sink you as an industry. In contrast, what the collectivization of Disney allows is where you take risks, because your products can cross-subsidize each other. You have one extreme block, like a box office success in the form of Avengers Endgame, and that allows you to subsidize and hedge against the risk of one of your other projects like Captain Marvel or Black Panther going belly up. So fundamentally here, we think that their side means that you don't expand to new markets. We think it also means that you do bad, or you produce films which are of lower quality, right? Because you don't know how much money you're going to make on this film, so you produce it at a lower budget. That means the film will flop relative to other similar films that we produce, which means you are disincentivized from producing more of those films going forward. Fourth point, this is an interesting one that I think really matters. Like, Disney does not just play for white audiences, it penetrates new markets all across the world. Note, for example, the fact that Fan Bingbing is a brief guest starring role in Iron Man 3. What does that mean? 1, you need to attract powerful stars in those regions to make those films attractive to begin with, and for those films to now be successful in those markets. 2, you can only attract like powerful and prominent stars and starlets if You are yourself a company that's very safe, that's very big, that has sort of wide media access that you get from being the enormous behemoth that Disney is. So I think we allow you to expand and penetrate your market, and that is just a good thing. Okay, second point, the quality and quantity of film. So we think this will ruin investment in film. A couple of reasons. Number one, note that this is a fairly radical action in the sense that no large media conglomerate, at least not in Hollywood, not filmmaking, has ever been broken up before. Presumably investors will not be scared because they know that should their investment grow to a certain size, it will be regarded as monopolistic, that the state is willing to take that away from you. So I think just a lot of investors are just going to be chilled off of this. Secondly, you draw, so what does that mean, right? So note the reason this matters is because movies are increasingly more and more expensive to make. There is an upward pressure on the quality of film. Now the average movie costs like something like 100 times more than it did 20 years ago. That's because the more the movies are in constant competition with each other, the better and better your film is, the more that audience expectations for your film are higher. That means you push lots and lots of film out of the industry because you're unable to produce film at the same quality because of that drying up effect on investment. To the extent that audiences enjoy watching film and will quite like and find it quite pleasing, we think that is a thing which will be litigated in this debate. Finally, like quality per film. Like say I'm giving an entire argument about how relaxing production cycles is better for making sure that you aren't under pressure to churn out lots and lots of films that are all themselves quite bad. The only response to Geneva is Inside Out was quite shit. That is a controversial opinion given its 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Finally, policing behavior within the industry. Any conclusion?
Are you aware that all studios constantly produce multiple movies for multiple years, so this is uncomparative?
Yeah, but it's worse on your side. Okay, policing behavior within the industry. I think that the rates of abuse that occur in the entertainment industry are, in the wake of the Me Too movement, we know, quite shocking. This is a problem across the board. Why is it better when there is one large conglomerate for us to police this sort of abusive behavior? Two reasons. One, you have a higher incentive to shush up abuse if you are a smaller a company. Note here, right? I think it's obvious. The knee-jerk response of profit is but like you have more to lose, more backlash if you're a big company. Yeah. But the difference is the scale of the backlash versus the scale of the harm this causes to your company. If you lose a single director, if you're a relatively small media franchise, if the backlash against you hits your one big film that year, you are just gone, right? Your entire company just goes bust. The difference here is if you're a larger company that can absorb those risks, it's more likely you're going to expose these incidents of abuse and to make sure that people are caught. Secondly, just a concentration of lots and lots of star power in the same place who can all tell their stories about that one person. So often the way these movements gain traction is by lots and lots of people together saying that person was abusive rather than them being distributed and therefore less persuasive as a block. That is important because the people who are the victims of this sort of abuse are often have a strong code of silence over them, which means that they are unable to speak up for themselves or fight back absent that concentration of talent. So very simply, films are better on our side, they are more representative on our side, and the industry is better on our side. Those are sufficient reasons for us to take this debate.
You think the previous speaker very much not have to go on the member of government?
You have is that the majority of the content we hear is completely uncomparative and a wash on both sides of the house. That's the first thing I'm going to show you. The second thing is the possibility of manipulation. When the entire media space of more than 50% of your movies, TV shows, talk shows is controlled by one single company, which has a specific interest in society, you get a huge possibility for manipulation, which is the biggest impact in this debate. So first of all, on why the opening half is uncomparative. The general idea is that the types of actors we have, the type of news we have, depends on the society we have. The reason our society changed in the last 15 years, and this is the reason why Marvel has started to seeing this demand and therefore changing the way they view things. They're not stupid. They understand that in a more liberal society, they need to produce more liberal and more inclusive movies. This happens whether Disney is one company or whether Disney is two companies. Because even if you're a smaller production house, let us say we have Marvel specifically, you have billions of dollars. You control one franchise, which is one of the biggest franchises in the world. So you have the money to take this risk, you have the incentive to take this risk, and therefore you're likely going to do this. Second, on the idea of quality and why that is uncomparative. They say, Inside Out, while we do agree that to a certain extent the opening argument does have a point, we see that Marvel also churns out movies every 2 months. We see that Marvel also produces movies for 8 years in and out. So this means, but also smaller studios do the same thing. When you see Quentin Tarantino, which has a specific studio, he also produces for a long time, and he also has multiple movies in the work. Why is this important? This means that this issue, even if you perhaps get a smaller quality to a certain extent, is very marginal and not important in this debate. Second of all, direct rebuttal to opening opposition, they say we need a huge amount of money to do it. Notice, DC also has a huge amount of money to do something, but when you have poor actors, poor writers, and poor decisions, you have a bad movie. This is not up to the amount of money you have, but to the decisions you make as a company. This is absolutely irrelevant for the motion. Also note that when we break up Disney, there's still going to be huge companies that have a large amount of money, therefore they're capable of taking this risk, they're capable, yeah.
So one of those companies is Netflix, that's the streaming service, which means you have huge asymmetry between people who are now producing the films and the people who are going to give the movies to the people with which Disney does.
The comparative is Disney launching their own streaming services, but when Disney launches their own streaming services, they control 50% of the market for movies and most likely 40% of the market for TV shows. And this is something Disney has said that they're going to do, and they already have it for animated TV shows. So this is the comparative. On the idea of having liberal media, lastly, why this is a less important issue than what I'm going to talk about. What we see is that we have different types of liberal media. Yes, it is true, and we agree with the opening government, that Disney controls a lot of it, but we have alternatives, such as The Guardian, such as The Economist, such as other news shows which allow us to see different media. Now, what is the most important issue? And this is the issue of manipulation. Now, why specifically? When you have a company that controls the entire media narrative, and notice that a lot of the movies, a huge majority of the movies, is controlled by Disney, they have the opportunity to control the public space. Because media in our society has a crucial role. First of all, in understanding what our society is. Just notice how American movies portray America. Second of all, they have a role in defining what the issues of our society is. Notice that movies after the Second World War often talked about Nazism and how we need to combat it, and often fought against it. Thirdly, movies can also be a driver of change. Now, this shows the importance of an actor that controls the entire narrative. The difference is that Disney specifically controls the entire narrative here because they produce the biggest movies in the world. Everyone has seen Marvel, everyone has seen Star Wars, but not everyone doesn't have access to other media. A majority of the people do have this access, therefore this is more important. Now, what specifically does Disney control? First of all, they control the movies every single child sees. They see all the animated shows, they see most of the Marvel shows, and they see also the TV series and smaller talk shows. Why is this so important? Because when you're young, you're likely to accept certain ideas as truthful. Specifically, look at how Marvel portrays America, and look at how Marvel portrays the state. You essentially have the state being shown as completely incompetent and needing to have specific, very gifted individuals, which are often very rich, which are able to combat this. In doing so, they are able to promote their own interests. Because notice, Disney is a company. They want to promote their own interests of less oversight because A, they do not want to be broken up, and B, they want to promote their own idea of the society they have. We see this in the Wall Street Journal directly attacking Bernie Sanders for every single thing he says. But when you can spread this idea on a huge scale of every single movie, showing the company as being less likely to attack, as the state being incompetent, as the state not being able to do something, then you have the opportunity to influence younger people, which take this for granted. Now, what is the specific issue with this? We say that on a principle level, it's inherently bad. We do not want any single private entity to have such a huge control over our state, over the way our people perceive this, because in doing so, they influence the way our state develops. They influence the way we vote. They influence the way our political system develops. We do not believe that Disney in this has any good incentives. They have an incentive to have as much profit as they can. This is something they can get by decreasing regulation, by promoting the state as being a bad guy, and promoting individuals and companies as being someone who's wanting to help. So why is this so bad? Yeah, open.
But presumably all the small film companies on your side also want neoliberalism. So the neoliberal brainwashing happens on your side. So what is this argument?
The comparative is, when you have smaller companies, when you have multiple small companies, they can fight you by differentiating themselves based on certain ideas. When you have Marvel, what they do is they put out movies all throughout the year. They put Black Panther 1 month and something else 2nd month, which doesn't allow other movies to actually get through, because the entire media spotlight is on what Marvel is producing. And notice, especially these smaller industries, comparatively, when Marvel has tens of billions, compared to when Marvel has 1 billion or 2 billion, it's easier for the smaller studios to break through and to fight multiple smaller studios such as Marvel, LucasArts, than to fight Disney and their single idea. In doing so, we finally get the opportunity to challenge this. Lastly, on what practically happens. What happens is that these companies, specifically Disney, stop any kind of discussion in their society, promote their own interests over the interests of others, and do not allow us to grow as a society. They stop us in the capitalist system we have, do not allow us to change it because of their own selfish interests. This is something which is harder for them to do if we break them up.
Do you think the previous speaker might not have to go about a member of opposition?
The only thing Luca is right about is when he says there's a lot of uncomparative material in this debate. And that really applies to the gov bench. He's however wrong when he says we're not comparative on our side. He's also wrong when he says he has an extension. So what I'm going to do in my speech is first explain why everything on their side doesn't change. Secondly, why we create market inefficiencies. Also a principal point, all of rebuttal is going to be integrated. Let's begin. It's interesting that Geneva says in her speech, it's taken too long for us to create a movie which represents women in a good way. There are probably two reasons why this can happen. Let's explore both of them. One is there are structural biases within the producers and script writers themselves. It is incredibly unlikely this will change. The comparative is not a huge amount of minority studios, it's an oligopoly of huge studios, still controlled by the most influential people in the movie industry, which means they suffer from the same ingrained biases if that's a structural mechanism on their side. Which means you still get tropes, even if you have gay representation, you have tropes of like flamboyance because you want to compensate and so on and so forth out of order. You also have casting choices which are more risk averse, as to say, look, we're going to cast a gay character with a straight actor because they're doing otherwise going to lose us money. Minority studios still get bought off on their side of the house because we have huge studios with billions of dollars who still have the market incentive to do this. They create an oligopoly with the same boards of directors and same incentives. But the second reason may be the biases of the public. But this also doesn't change. So if the public wants to watch westernized depictions of minorities, this probably still happens. So what OG answers to this is, yeah, but people don't have the opportunity to move away from Disney status quo. It's unclear why they would want to. So I wouldn't see people saying, fuck, I hate Disney, but I have nothing else to watch and I watch this shit. That's untrue. People flock to cinemas. Millions of people watch Disney clips on YouTube. Ask how many mothers were traumatized by their children singing Let It Go from Frozen. To the extent to which that is true, it's incredibly unclear why people would switch to any other type of movies, given this is what they were accustomed to, and this is what their children love the most. The minority studios are the smaller share of the market. So it's unclear why on their side, studios are more likely to represent minorities when now they're actually beholden to the majority of that market and they want to compete for these customers, right? So at the end of the day, it's unclear why they get any structural change. All of this applies to news as well. So even if you break up Disney, you still have a number of large news companies. So the comparative still is, if journalists have the similar biases as producers, and the consumers of news have similar biases as consumers of movies, as claimed by OG, the incentive to produce the same type of news still exists, and you still have large news companies with the same biases, and niche portals like Jacobin Magazine, which caters to Marxists like me. Now let's deal with Luca's supposed extension. Note that given that what they create is an oligopoly, his extension is contingent on the idea that there's an incentive for these huge studios who are now broken up to change the way that they behave. It is incredibly unlikely why they want to do so. He says the movie industry has an incentive to be deregulated. This incentive still exists. The movie lobby is still strong. They lobby as separate companies, but they still lobby for the same lack of regulation. So to the extent to which Luca is completely contingent on OG for proving that the companies are going to change their behavior, he equally proves nothing as does OG. This therefore means they do not fulfill their principle because the companies that they break up, even if to a marginally smaller extent, are still going to have small incentives. The comparative CG wants to give is therefore probably a state movie production service. We're unclear as to why that would be the best scenario. But a few more points. First of all, mitigation. We're unsure this will not happen again. This naturally happens on markets, like airline industries in the USA controlled by 3 companies. Procter & Gamble owning like all of the hygiene industry. 6 companies owning the entire food industry. naturally it happens that companies become stronger than others at some point because of external and internal factors, have the buying power to buy each other off. This may plausibly happen again in 15 years. And they don't have the fiat to say we're going to break them up over and over and over again, because they don't have the fiat to extend this motion to unrealistic lengths. They would have to explain why they would have the political capital to do that, to be painted as a candidate who interferes with the private market over and over, also against the movie lobby, which Rubin himself claims exists, lobbies against regulation. But secondly, as Laura points out, the places where we watch this are still equally horrible. So even if it's not a Disney streaming service, it's Netflix and Amazon, which are huge corporations, beholden to the same market incentives to which Disney is currently beholden, and they have not a monopoly, but like an oligopoly, because there's two of them, the same as Apple and iPhone and the other thing, Samsung, on the telecom industry. So what does this mean? This means that given that where we watch it still has the same incentive and is still centralized, the movies that we watch are still beholden to that location, which we are most likely to access, because that's where most people watch movies, and these companies cannot be broken up because they're a singular company, right? And they also have a safe revenue, because people hold subscriptions, which means they're safe to decide which movies they're going to buy off and which movies they're not. But furthermore, this creates market imbalances, right? Because those streaming services get more power, because now they can gauge their deals to different companies that you've now broken up, and blackmail them essentially into doing things like having lower profit margins. So for example, if Disney has, for example, 20 profit margin on film itself to Netflix, Netflix can now say to these different studios, you can have lower profit margins, right? Because everyone has an incentive to sell movies to Netflix. What then happens? This means that you make these studios more risk averse. They're more likely to save money on things such as paying actors less. They're less likely to invest in screenplay and production. They're more likely to get simplified movies. They're more likely to make choices as whitewashing the cast, or like straight people washing the cast, which essentially instrumentalizes what Orwell talks about. So what essentially happens on their side of the house is that you still have huge companies with same incentives, which you cannot break up, which are still beholden to market competition, which makes everything uncomparative. But even if this impact is relative, it still is an impact to the extent that it allows less efficiency in terms of control of money, therefore more risk-averse decisions are being made openly.
The reason that Disney pushes one liberal news narrative is because it was founded on one liberal view that was held by Walt Disney, just like News Corp pushes Murdoch's view. Why is this not likely to change to the point at which your directors and your board are different? This is basic economics.
Because you still have to explain why these directors and board, who are different people, are likely to hold different worldviews and are likely to have different biases or be less susceptible to biases. There's still influential people in the movie industry who've grown up and succeeded in that industry by following the same business logic, right? So it's unclear why this applies. Note also, all the risk-averse decisions around gender and race are more likely to be made at the point where you have these incentives. But also finally, there's a principal point. It's a basic capitalist principle, but I think it's true. So if you invested your own capital in something, if your consumers, who had the agency to choose whether they dislike your content, who had the agency to brand you as unjust, but did not, have profiled you to be the strongest company, and if you're providing a service, which note, there is no a priori obligation to provide, so there is no moral obligation of any company to provide a service to people, so any service that is provided is necessarily an added value to society which we cannot expect. The only situation which the state has the right to intervene is if it can prove market efficiency and it increases this added value. Wishful thinking, marginal at best, not reasons for state intervention. That's the comparative we need to prove. Close the opposition.
You think the previous week we learned to have about the government whip?
Supposed to deal with both of our oppositions. Like, let's look at what Orwell is bringing you and why this is not relevant in this debate. Firstly, they're telling you that we will have better movie crafting, better graphics, and so on. We tell you that this is not really comparative in this debate because companies, even when breakdown, still have a huge amount of capital, so at best they have a really marginal benefit. The benefit will consist of Marvel not making like 3 movies this year, but rather making 2 movies, and we don't see the importance of it. So we think that in the end, any kind of idea that we will have less movies or lesser quality movies, because we are talking about really rich companies, even when it broke down, will not happen. The second thing they tell you is that we will have like more different characters and so on because the studios have more like capital, so they can make judgments that are not so sure and risk whether to make something different. We tell you that inherently the power they have doesn't come from them being a part of Disney, but having good stories that audience loves. Like, people don't go to watch Star Wars because it's owned by Disney. They're going to watch it because they love this plotline. So anyways, if you put a black person or a woman in it, they have still the ability to risk it because people generally go there because they love movies, therefore nothing changes dependent on who is actually owning the company. Now, the third thing that I'm telling you is that we have like problems with people being victimized and so on, but we tell you that this is completely out of the debate. If you want to look the example of Harvey Weinstein, who owns his own company, not being a part of like Disney or anything else, he still had enough power and credibility to avoid accusations of sexual assault for years and years. So in any way, being a part of Disney or not being part of the Disney doesn't make any difference or is out of the debate. Now let's look at what CEO brings you. Like this whole idea of Netflix and other services being able to blackmail smaller companies. We think that this is highly unlikely for 2 reasons. The first one is that you have more and more streaming services, meaning if you get a bad price from, I don't know, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, HBO, Go, somebody will offer you a better price for you actually being able to stream your movies. But even if you disregard this, the second answer is that the popularity of these movies, such as Marvel movies or Star Wars franchise, are quite too big for these services to risk not to have these movies on their services because of the people generally want to see them and generally will pressure them in order to get the ability to watch this on streaming service. So we are thinking that it's highly unlikely that any of this will happen. The other thing they tell you is this basic capitalistic principle that that people had the agency to choose. They chose Disney, therefore Disney has the ability to be together and do whatever it wants. We tell you that people, on the first place, it's quite not true that they have agency. Like Luca explains to you the kind of manipulation that is happening, and I will be going to that a bit further. So therefore, your whole idea of what is good, of what you want to watch, is created by Disney throughout your whole childhood, throughout your whole life. So the idea that you actually bought into it, and therefore this is justified, is not really truthful. Now let's look at the content that we bring here in this debate. So Luca explains to you how terrible this manipulation looks. That since childhood, everything you watch is created mostly by Disney or other parts. That the news that you read every day is again created by the same people. And this manipulation is not so obvious as other kinds of manipulation when somebody tells you some policy is good or some policy is bad. For the reason that it's not openly coming. It tells you how Marvel Studios are able to send you messages about how the state works and so on through the means of movies and so on. So we believe that this is first problematic on a principle level, because we don't believe that any company should have such huge power of what you think, of what decisions you're making, and further on. So even if you don't, but we think that comparatively we can make this situation better. Why? We think that what will actually happen can be said in Divide et Impera. So what will happen is you have a lot of companies such as, I don't know, 20th Century Fox, Marvel, Star Wars, whatever, who are mainly competing with each other because they are like their biggest competitors. Like they are the largest budget, the films with the largest budgets. They are the film that you need to beat in order to be like the best company. Therefore, when they are not with each other, they are quite likely to be very incentivized to offer kind of different perspectives and such things in order to compete with each other, because they are the main competitors to each other and not anymore to some kind of small movie companies and so on that they used to have the ability to fight with because because they didn't have to fight each other. Secondly, we tell you that there is a lot more space for some kind of independent media to come out when they are fighting each other. Because if Star Wars movie comes the same day as, I don't know, new Marvel movie in order for them to compete, then somebody who will, the independent media house that they would be competing on the other side of the house has the ability to maybe find a date, has the ability to kind of get more of a spot on itself, and therefore to a certain amount have a little more of a different perspective and not have the similar. So we tell you they will fight each other, so making them having more perspectives, and that somebody third could come and maybe have more on a spotlight. So we also think that we beat on this our opponents, because at best what they're telling you is a wash. We don't know whether society is the one who is dictating what we look, or whether that's the companies. We prove why specifically Disney has the interest to promote certain things, and that's why we win this debate.
Thank you, previous speaker, very much, and I have to go on the opposition witness.
Panel. Disney is not the only market failure in the movie industry. Because streaming services that have their own productions, are a market failure in and of itself in the status quo. And it will be worse on their side of the house if they succeed in breaking this up, because it's going to be more vertical. Because you have the streaming service in your hands, but you also have productions in your hands, as opposed to just having productions and stuff like this that they care about on their side of the house. And they also deal directly with the consumer. Meaning that if they have market inefficiencies, this harms the consumer more so in the production of movies and stuff like this. Why is it not comparative as closing government tries to prove? Because subscription makes it unlikely there are multiple services. You're not going to buy the same subscription, which means there's no internal competition. This is why people have one or two, and there cannot be like 10 different streaming companies and stuff like this. It's similar to Facebook and social media as well, because there are inherent benefits to minimize agents, because you can then scroll to everything if it's on one page and stuff like this. This is why it's not comparative. They can say, but you also have competition on streaming services. Like name a few that are popular and that people know about. News, because it's clear that opening government loses their other content to our extension. This is why they prioritize their news extension and what they talk about here. There's two options here. They have the political capital for breaking up Fox News and other news corporations. We're really unsure whether this is the case in this debate, but let's say they do. This means that the problem is justification and market abuse, because they're not symmetric and same. On one hand, you're breaking up the news company because it's also a part of different movie industry stuff like this, but on the other hand, you have to break Fox News just because it's a news agency, which is different principles and stuff like this. That means that there's a higher burden to justify this. This literally means that conservatives were like, the state should never interfere, now have also this idea of being targeted for this, which means that when you segment this, guess what? Like the majority of these segmented media are going to talk about how they're going to frame the government and how they're going to make the discourse work, which is their only interest here. B, if they don't, if they don't have the capital to do so, meaning they asymmetrically harm and subsidize one side of ideas and segment others, right? Because they segment the liberal media and they keep the right-wing media the same, monopolized under one umbrella and stuff like this. We think this necessarily leads to more polarization or stronger right-wing media and stuff like this. Open government assumes that movies are more progressive, assumes that the movies are less progressive than reality. And this is the cause of this. We say that people who work for this are more progressive on average than the average of society and stuff like this. So there's two solutions to this, or why this happens still as they frame this. Either market stops them from being progressive, there's no demand for this. This is why ETA, when they talk about like, but people also like people still want to see Star Wars, so nothing changes in this debate because people's perceptions are still the same. Or, which is open in government's case, this is the idea that crucially that means that like there's conspiracy or there's competition problems that exist to some extent. We say those are far worse when the same companies, so they cannot provide any difference to why Netflix production has different incentives than the production of Disney and stuff like this, actually have more power over the market and over the competition because they have their own production and stuff like this. And this is the crucial link of our extension that we bring you. The free innovation that's now transferred because there's no like market abuse and stuff like this that happens on our side of the house does not dwell down to smaller companies who are going to be hyper-progressive, but dwells down to Netflix production and streaming services production, because now they have less leverage as production as Disney has in the status quo, because it's really big to tell Netflix like, fuck off, we're going to do this and you have to sell this because we also like sell you a bunch of these other movies. Which means that the same metric that applies in their side of the house, and this is that the industry is fucked up, is the same, but now the industry is also a streaming industry, which makes it far worse or not competitive at best in their side of the house as well as this. How does umbrella function? Open opposition deals with science, right? They talk about that there's internal competition, so it's like P&G, you have two shampoos, they compete, like at the end of the year they compare who the best, blah blah, there's some reasons for this and something. We tell you crucially, this is only possible if you have leverage over streaming services, which you necessarily only have if you are this market of a monopoly that you have in the status quo. Because if you don't have this, then their mechanism of being like subsidized under umbrella, something like this, like this market segment that is gone, because literally the streaming services squeeze you out because they have their own streaming production services, which they can always compare to you and tell you, you cannot do this and stuff like this. Why is Netflix necessarily worse? Because there's no public figures to criticize. You can criticize producers, directors in the Disney industry, and they are responsible to some extent to this criticism because they are public figures and they care about their public perceptions. Who do you know who runs Netflix? Do you know any of the person who you can talk to and say, "Who? But this is going to harm your like, public influence and stuff like this." There's no direct influence by progressive artists, producers, and stuff like this as the producing industry. Secondly, as Tim talks about in his extension, this is really important. The constant revenue that Netflix has means that, have you ever tried to like unfollow from Netflix? They call you like 10,000 times about this, meaning they have a huge sway over consumers comparatively to these industries, because the industry is never sure if the movie is going to go good or bad. It has some sort of like how do you say, like precautions after this. But Netflix doesn't have this because they are sure how many people have. This is why they're going to have much more smart and perverse incentives or this, stuff like this. If they told you, but we can break them up, no, because there's no different boards, there's no different CEOs. They need to make for this debate to work in Netflix because it's one company. So it's unclear why, even if they have the capital to break it up, they don't in this debate, why this is still going to work. Benefits of umbrella, two specific mechanisms that we talk about comparing to opening opposition. There's more push for sectors because of ability to promote and advertise is crucial here. You only get this when you have huge sway over the production industries comparing you to Netflix and stuff like this. Secondly, we push it in distribution, right? Netflix means that there's more leverage for us. We push it on to Netflix in order for them to accept this. This is different to what they say about market segmentation. It has more impact in this debate. I will take opening and then principle.
Please be the first speaker in this debate to engage in OG's material about why one Disney forces actors, anchors, and broadcasters to cuddle up to Disney and promote their vision, rather than allowing internal reform.
Now, this is the engagement. One Disney is far less worse than one Netflix. And that's my engagement with this, with our extension and stuff like this, because you don't prove that this is not what's going to happen something from the other side, because you still have to like, get people access to these movies, because people don't go to the cinema anymore, you watch it on Netflix and streaming services and stuff like this. The part of cinema is really marginal. Principle. State intervention makes it worse in this case, because it worsens the market imbalances. This is the example of the army right now that I'm using to whip things essentially. And this is clear. If you have one army and one supplier, this is a much better case because if you have one army and two suppliers, then the suppliers get screwed, right? Even though intentionally in the idea we feel like, yeah, but it's better for competition if you have two suppliers. This means that the market failures, which are market failures that combine, actually create market successes, which is the case in the stage where we have Disney, which is a market failure, and Netflix services, which is a market failure as well. Not proving market failures on their behalf and how they get better is why you cannot never go with this policy. Because it's not about promoting progressive ideas and stuff like this, it's about literally the government infringement on the freedom of capital. The only sure thing compared in this debate is that we win on the principal case that they did not justify the burden to do this. So even if you don't buy, oh, this is going to be worse for consumers or worse for production of liberal media because Netflix and all the other like English are going to have the same incentives as they are, we'll still win on the principal point. Very proud to say.
Thank you very much.